I suppose I should start with an apology, which is fitting for Yom Kippur. In the week leading up to this moment, as we watched the weather forecast, I should say for the 2 weeks leading up to this moment, we were noticing some trends shifting back and forth, so much so that I had two introductions for tonight prepared. One in case we would be out here with beautiful weather, and one in the event of rain that forced us to move fully indoors. And at around 1 o'clock today, when the time came to push print, I said, we only need the good weather one. It can just push print. So it's my fault. It's my fault for the drizzles. But even in spite of that, and maybe even because of it, this moment right now is, in a lot of ways, the highlight of the last 7 months. When we first realized that COVID might impact our high holiday celebrations, we really had no idea what things would look like. But standing here, looking out on so many faces, and yes, I can see your faces around your masks and behind them, and hearing your voices sing with us throughout this evening's service has really made all of the work, all of the stress, the meetings and phone calls more than worth it. This moment, as I said, is really the highest one yet. But even as special as it feels to be here tonight, there were still many low moments as well. The lowest moment for me came at the end of May. By that point, it had been nearly 3 months of trying to figure everything out on the fly. Nearly 3 months of trying to learn different online streaming platforms and technology setups. Nearly 3 months of making sure before Shabbat services began that in addition to my talit, I had 2 laptops and an iPad. And nearly 3 months of nightly meetings, classes, and preparations for the days to come. At the same time, it also meant that it had been nearly 3 months of Naomi and me both working from home with Micah, a energetic, almost three-year-old, and Sophie, who at between 2 and 5 months had little interest in sleeping through the night or napping during the day. And with 3 months of trying to do everything for our community, which was becoming an online community, while also trying to be there at all moments for my family. Of course, trying to do all of that really meant that I was succeeding at neither. Missing moments where I was needed at home, and missing moments and opportunities for connection here. I realized that in many ways, we were among the lucky ones. My family is healthy and safe, and both Naomi and my jobs were stable and with enough flexibility that we could work remotely. But that was a difficult perspective to maintain, with 2 children refusing to nap for the only 2 hours of the day when 2 parents were trying to get anything done. On one of those difficult days, I did what I often do when I'm feeling stressed, which is stay up too late watching TV. On that night, still without any live baseball to watch, I found the next best thing: shows about baseball. This time, it was the premiere of a new special on ESPN titled Imperfect, the Roy Halladay story. If you aren't familiar with him, Roy Halladay, or Doc as he was frequently known, was among the greatest pitchers in baseball in the early 2000s. Playing for the Toronto Blue Jays, Halladay was legendary for his work ethic. He was relentlessly focused on being the best pitcher in baseball and developed a routine for both his body and mind to keep his performance as close to perfection as he could make it. While he found tremendous individual success as a 6-time All-Star and Cy Young Award winner with the Blue Jays, he never had a chance at a championship. That's what happens when you play in the same division as the Yankees and the Red Sox. So before the 2010 season, Halladay was traded to the defending National League champion, Philadelphia Phillies. During his first year with the Phillies, Halladay made history twice. On May 29th, he became only the 20th pitcher in baseball history to pitch a perfect game, retiring every single batter he faced. Then, on October 6, exactly 10 years from next week, in Halladay's first ever playoff game, he pitched a no-hitter, only the second ever postseason no-hitter in baseball history. For a player like Halladay, who pushed himself so hard, these two accomplishments were moments of perfection, when he truly had risen to heights that only a handful had ever reached. But Halladay shied away from that individual recognition even as much as he deserved it. So much so that on custom watches he gave to his teammates after his perfect game, he had the phrase inscribed, "We did it together. Thanks." Instead, he remained solely on winning that team championship. The Phillies fell short in 2010, but were right back in the playoffs the following year. In the final game of the first round of the playoffs in 2011, a game that was played on this night on Nidrei, the Phillies were playing St. Louis, and of course Halladay was on the mound. He gave up one run in the first inning, and that was it. He pitched shutout baseball the rest of the way. But he was going against one of his closest friends, Chris Carpenter, who on that night was just a little bit better. St. Louis won the game 1-0, eliminating Halladay and the Phillies. No one realized it at the time, but that game was the turning point of Halladay's career. Early on in the game, he felt a pop in his back. Being the perfectionist he was, Halladay pushed through the pain to finish, but it was the first in a series of back issues that eventually led to the end of his playing career only 2 years later. While Halladay's mental focus remained committed to perfection, his body was not able to cooperate. To try and find a few more moments of success, Halladay turned to prescription painkillers. He battled depression and mental illness as part of this addiction and struggled to come to grips with his new reality. For someone who relentlessly sought perfection and even experienced it on the baseball field, the adjustment to life without it was very difficult. As Halladay's wife, Brandy, explained in a new biography of Halladay, he would get so overwhelmed with what wasn't good enough that I don't think he ever truly appreciated what was good. He was always looking for something that could fill that, but he had it all along. What he wanted was family. What he wanted was home and peace and sanctuary. He couldn't stop long enough to realize he already had it. A place where Halladay did find sanctuary was in the air. A lifelong aviation enthusiast, Halladay was a pilot and enjoyed flying airplanes throughout his life. That's where he was on November 7th, 2017, flying in his own airplane above the Gulf of Mexico when his plane crashed into shallow water, taking his life at the age of 40. A tragic ending to a life that many would consider, up to that point, to be perfect. Perfect is a word we use often. We strive to earn a perfect score on a test. We adjust our outfits until they look perfect. And we try and try again until we do something perfectly. For some, it's a goal that motivates us to do the best we can at everything, while for others, perfection drains us of energy in pursuit of a fool's gold. During those first few months of the pandemic, I admit that I too was in search of perfection, trying to be the perfect pandemic rabbi and the perfect pandemic husband and father, as if such things really existed. But as I reflected on Roy Halladay's legacy in late May, 10 years after his perfect moment, I began to realize that perfection is an illusion, something that this pandemic has made painfully clear. What has been perfect these past 6 months? It's a short, almost non-existent list. Nothing has been perfect. I saw that early on when I canceled my flight to attend a close friend's wedding in late March. And so instead of the wedding that he had been planning for months, he got married in his condo with 2 witnesses there, and the rabbi, along with 200 other people joining on Zoom. It was the first Zoom wedding I attended, but has not been the last. We've all had moments like this. Senior year traditions that were missed by our 12th graders. A milestone birthday that became a video tribute instead of a party. Passover seders with 2 people instead of 20. All the times that our camera, which was my phone by the way, that it dropped out during the middle of Shabbat services. These imperfections became a way of life and were on display for everyone to see. So much has been on display these days too, with Zoom backgrounds as regular windows into our homes. Our ordinarily private spaces have been visible for everyone to see. I developed a game out of it, in fact. How tall of a Lego tower could I build with Micah that would just be out of the frame on my Zoom background? Or perhaps more often, how much or really how little of the mess behind me did I have to clean up before a meeting so that we could look presentable? On Rosh Hashanah, I spoke about finding meaning from our experiences during this pandemic. One more meaning that I found is being comfortable with our imperfections and, in fact, embracing them as part of our identities. In June of 2010, less than a month after Roy Halladay's perfect game, Dr. Brené Brown, a research professor at the University of Houston, gave a TED Talk connected to her book that had just been published, The Gifts of Imperfection. In her talk, which has been viewed just under 50 million times and is the 4th most watched talk on the site, she speaks about the courage to be imperfect and the importance to let ourselves be seen. Perfectionism is self-destructive simply because there is no such thing as perfect, Dr. Brown wrote in her book. Perfection is an unattainable goal. So much of perfectionism is tied up with perception. She went on to write, we want to be perceived as perfect. Again, this is unattainable. There is no way to control perception regardless of how much time and energy we spend trying. She goes on to explain the close connection between this feeling and a feeling of shame. Where perfectionism exists, shame is always lurking. In fact, shame is the birthplace of perfectionism. Why do we feel pressured to be perfect? Because it feels and appears like everyone else is, and they surely look down on us if we're not perfect too. It sounds so trivial when we put it this way, but it's real, and it's damaging. Stress, mental health, addiction, all of these come from our attempt at perfection. To try and address these pressures of perfectionism, Brown researched people who, quote, were engaging with the world from a place of authenticity and worthiness. People who presented their true, vulnerable selves. And what did they do? First, they spoke about their imperfections in a tender and honest way, and without shame and fear. Second, they were slow to judge themselves and others. They appeared to operate from a place of, we're all doing the best we can. If there's a phrase that I've heard more often than any other during these days of pandemic, that's it. How are things going with virtual school? We're doing the best we can. How are you managing not seeing your grandchildren? We're doing the best we can. How's it being at home with no visitors? We're doing the best we can. None of us know how to handle any of this. And admitting that doesn't make us imperfect. It makes us real. It makes us vulnerable. Yom Kippur, this day, is a day for us to admit our vulnerability. Today, on what we think of as the holiest day of the year, a day when we don't concern ourselves with the earthly matters of eating and drinking or other matters of comfort, we are vulnerable. On this day, we stand before God on the heavenly throne and present ourselves as we truly are, saying time and again, Lemancha Eloheinu aseh velo lanu, re'eh amidatenu dalim verekim. Do it for your sake, O God, not ours. See how we stand before you this day, humbled and empty. We come before you in our most vulnerable state and ask you to judge us even with our imperfections. As we said a moment ago, we are neither so insolent nor so obstinate as to claim in your presence that we are righteous without sin. Aval anachnu v'avotenu chatanu. For we, like our ancestors, have sinned. And how do we make that statement? How do we come before God in these vulnerable moments? We do it together, as one. Our tradition recognizes that it's so difficult for us to admit our faults as individuals. That's why all the confessionals we say on this day are written in plural. We have sinned. We're in this together because we need each other to be vulnerable. As the Talmud puts it, Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh. All of us are responsible for each other. Or, in Dr. Brown's words, our imperfections are not inadequacies. They are reminders that we're all in this together, imperfectly, but together. If there's one lesson of Yom Kippur, if there's one lesson, one meaning to take out of this months-long nightmare, let it be this understanding and acceptance of our own vulnerability. Let it be okay to say we're all doing the best we can. And in this instance, let that be enough. If we can learn this lesson from our health crisis, we may yet emerge healthier on the other side. Then, perhaps we can find what Brown calls wholehearted living. Wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging. Just last summer, in July of 2019, Roy Halladay was formally inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. He was the first player the Baseball Writers Association voted in posthumously since Roberto Clemente in 1972. It's traditional for the player being inducted to give a speech marking the occasion, but on that Sunday in Cooperstown, it was Roy's widow, Brandy, who gave the speech in his memory. As she spoke through tears, she concluded with this message. I think that Roy would want everyone to know that people are not perfect. We are all imperfect and flawed in one way or another. We all struggle, but with hard work, humility, and dedication, imperfect people can still have perfect moments. As we look around right now at people who are far from perfect, at the start of a Yom Kippur that feels far from perfect, let us remember to acknowledge and remember all the imperfections around us, and through our vulnerability, together, create a perfect moment. May we all be inscribed for a happy, healthy, and imperfect year ahead. Gemar Chatima Tova.